Greetings, everyone. Welcome. It's Discussing Tabletop. It is I, Emperor of the Thank you. Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, leading off this entire insanity. And, of course, joining me today is Momo, who is fortunate enough to be very nice and enjoy joining me for these things.
Yeah. When we don't talk about magic, I enjoy it.
Look, sometimes I feel like it, but less lately, and especially like with
man, I've got opinions mostly on storylines, but I think the cards are fine. I actually think the cards in the new set are fun and cool, but
like part of me is like, you've come up with an interesting idea, kind of, though again, the entire storyline of, we've talked about how like there wasn't any build-up, it just sort of happened.
yeah.
Like, the actual implication of that story that we skipped through we have to have some kind of build-up to this thing seems kind of neat and maybe has some neat directions, but we honestly all know they're going to mulligan the entire thing in some kind of way, and I don't know what that is.
Time travel, so I can take a guess.
Well, they also want to update some things about, like, from their words, we know they're going to kind of move away from the Planeswalkers as the be-all, end-all kind of cool thing, and maybe open up, like, other planar travel from, like, you know, things like the Weatherlight and stuff like that, you know, bring that kind of shit back, which is fine. I don't mind that, you know, like, the legendary clue of the Weatherlight's an important part of a story and travels between planes. You could have just done that without this shit. Anyway. But speaking of wizards, let's go into our first topic. Yeah.
What'd they do this time?
Well.
Good? Bad?
Neutral. I'm going to call this neutral. Because
I'll take it.
The entire thing is, they threw out, which I had to go through D&D Beyond's Twitter to access this, because I could not find it on just looking through D&D Beyond's website.
Nice.
Their community update. So, this is on D&D Beyond.
Oh, it's so bright.
It's D&D Beyond, so it's of course white. So, brightness warning.
Blind.
But, like, it's sort of that thing of, not only are they relegating all of their actual news to D&D Beyond from their actual website, but they're also, like, putting it 2 layers deep or something? I don't know. This is just... It's weird for something that feels like it's actually a reach out to the community to kind of, like... This feels like they're trying to continue to be, like, damage control. Like, there's a community update, it feels like there's a part of this as damage control.
I mean, it's always going to be damage control, but see, it's not going to be enough until there's 2 people that kicked out of the company. Hot take.
Probably not. So, just to go through this briefly, and to go through some of this kind of entire thing, their community upgrade, they talked about what they wanted to do in this quarter of 2023. They talked about what they did through the 5.1 into Creative Commons, put out 4 D&D 1 packets, which they have, had 3 of the surveys already. Okay.
They did have those.
Mm-hmm. Which, honestly, even after our discussions, I was listening to some people, other than like us, talk about the last update. It seems very hated for what they did for the last one.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't like the last one. Which I agree that a lot of it was bad. But in the experimental, you know?
It is experimental. I was thinking, didn't they kind of like... Oh, that's right, they
made Druid bad.
Honestly, like, having this week talked about Pathfinder 2nd Edition and talk about all the classes, I actually learned more about a bunch of the classes I didn't know when I was talking about them. Like, I didn't know that a Pathfinder 2nd Edition Druid doesn't automatically wild shape. You can easily make it that you wild shape, because you can either take the, effectively their version of a Druid Circle to get wild shape, but you can also learn from other circles and stuff like that, or other groups. So, you mean you could be like this one and also take wild shape, but it's like an entire feat chain that you're like, I learned shape changing. And it's a lot more in-depth than just the normal wild shape, which is kind of cool. So it's like, I like the idea of a lot of that, like, I specialize in this, I specialize in that, you know, I thought it was cool. Like, I specialize in having big old wolf with me. Anyway. not to digress, they have the In Progress tab if you want to load this up or yourselves, everybody.
Yep.
Since I put the link in chat. They're working on translating the 5.1 in other languages. Great. I think that's fine.
Yep.
Here's the one that's interesting. Review previous editions for inclusions in Creative Commons. Now, that's kind of interesting because what else would they put in there and stuff like that?
Well, assuming, I assume like 3.5 and stuff.
3.5 is the one that feels the easy one.
That's the big one because there are entire systems built off that, so you kind of have to.
Now, they have a comment later on about what this means, and it says, before adding previous additions to Creative Commons, we need to review materials for potential exclusions to preserve the D&D brand. For example, we would not unintentionally release Tiamat or Vecna brand elements under Creative Commons. Like they kind of did with some things in 5.1?
Well, yeah, to an extent. But to be fair, I think this is fine. Because they own those characters, so it's kind of whatever.
And here's the one that, like, I heard some discourse about this, because I was, when I heard about this update, I saw some people talk about it. The publish our internal content policy for D&D products. This is kind of like the weird one, because it seems like people get the feeling that's a little bit of what they were doing with their morality clause, kind of. But they're also, like, it's something... So it's, like, both good and could be bad kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's, like, what kind of things they like in their products. So that kind of feels a little bit like we don't know what path they're going to take with it. It's, again, it's not a bad thing. They're basically saying, these are the kind of things we support for our types of products. You know, hey, we don't want hate speech. We don't want, racist things in there. Cough, cough, problems that they've had with some of this kind of stuff in the past. Putting a policy out for this kind of thing maybe helps them avoid more mistakes, and also is a good thing to say, we don't like this type of bad thing, but also, what will they all say?
Who knows? I mean, we're not going to know until they publish this stuff, so...
And apparently they want to... Yeah, go ahead.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. They want to update the core rules, and then...
I've been doing that, that's whatever.
Yeah, and then ensure the D&D 1's compatible with 5e and the SRD, which kind of is...
Kind of what they were also just doing anyways.
Yeah!
But it's the problem of 1 D&D is very standardized in level progression, but 5e isn't, so maybe they'll like update it to be a little more compatible, which would be very nice.
I think there's certain things that I've heard about this entire discussion, especially because of the compatibility and stuff like that, is that it's one of the things that I didn't realize that what they were really trying to do, which I was thinking about this more, is that they are trying to make, with D&D 1 especially, and with how they've been changing things for the basic core rules and how they express things in actual 5e, they've been trying to homogenize the system and make it system agnostic. Which is kind of... It's difficult, and I think that's the problem.
Yes. It's hard to do that. The main issue is 5e is very much 5e. Well, it is malleable. It does have malleability to a certain extent. 1 D&D certainly has more rules to it. So it's harder to mesh that with 5e, which, well, it has a lot of rules. A lot of those rules aren't, like, extensive to the point where you can't just ignore them.
Yeah. And they've got their list of things that they want to update and all this, which is great. But, again, like, I think they've basically chosen a route which would have been great if D&D was designed that way for both D&D 5e and 1. Because if I take a system like Bessem, now, we call it the anime system, but truly speaking, it is an incredibly agnostic system. It is just choose a flavor of adventure, you can build it. It just, because it was kind of tapered towards anime, it tends to have that feel.
Yeah.
But I could do a, comic book superhero adventure. I could do, like, a Terminator game using Besom. It'd be weird, but I could do it. I could do, a Lord of the Rings, the original book, not the movies. Or the movies. Or, something else entirely. But sort of, like, I can do a lot more because it is a system that's built in a way to be agnostic. It's the idea of a system agnostic thing is, I think, it's easy to malleable it to any direction. And the problem with system agnostic, I'm going to say, for one thing, is it does put a lot of work on, you guessed it, the person running it.
Yeah.
And in a medium difficulty system like Besom, you're probably going to want to have some experience. On a difficult system, you don't want to have it that. D&D 5e is a beginner system. I would want to put the least amount of work on beginner GMs and DMs. I mean, DMs.
Yeah.
And they're putting a lot of work on them.
I mean, yeah, I kind of agree, but more, yeah, it's hard to say, because I don't necessarily think that 5e is an easy system to run, as it is anyways. I think it does have a lot of complications to running it.
Yeah, no.
Mostly because there's 48 subclasses in the fucking game. Well, actually, there's more than that now.
No, I mean, I do agree that there is a lot to it that makes it, that it is more difficult.
It's less the rule aspect and more it doesn't have a lot of books, but what's there is a lot of content.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the thing that, like, knowing 48 subclasses, or at least being familiar with them, is one thing, But then also, like, designing an entire world for your players to be in and make it feel to in any degree as a world isn't always easy. Like, I personally like cheating.
Mm-hmm. You used existing worlds,
yeah,
which is perfectly fine.
Yeah, like, I like World of Darkness. Guess what it is? It's just Earth with some supernatural shit.
Yeah.
Shadowrun, it's got its own version of Future Earth.
I mean, Lightning and I have made our own incredibly convoluted settings, so.
But that's the thing, is you work together to do that, which is helpful too, because that means you do have to do half the work in setting up an entire
have world building friend.
Mm-hmm.
And that world was a little bit stagnant until I made rabbit people, which caused a lot of ideas.
Mm-hmm. And Worm, I'm going to tell you, you do make worlds. You like that thing a kind of lot. I like doing that. I just don't like dedicating the time to a lot of that sometimes.
There's a certain joy to finishing. I mean, I say finishing. My world's nowhere near fucking finished, and Lightning's world's been worked on for what, like 5+ years. It's nowhere near finished either. But there's a certain joy to looking at it when you're like, you've done something like, I made this.
Yeah.
And even if it's not the best, like, I know my world's not the best world, because honestly, my world's not the best, because there's one country that's done it, and that's it. The rest of the world is pretty blank. But I can look at that one country and be like, I made that, and it's mostly okay. If I ignored some of the plot holes.
No, and, I've certainly have made my own worlds in the past. It's just, like, honestly, I think a couple of them have been burned in weird ways that have made me take a step back, I feel like.
Yeah.
I can speak of past games where I did a bunch of work to create some worlds, and honestly, they were taken in very weird and unusual ways that really just, a lot of that, like, didn't matter,
I mean, I've been there. Like, I had someone just do weird shit in some worlds I've made before.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes players can just break a world, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like accidentally. It's hard to intentionally allow them to. But sometimes players can do something like you didn't expect, and man, that's like pretty world changing.
Yep. But, I mean, getting back to community update, they're continuing their stuff with D&D 1. I gotta be honest, I am kind of so meh about D&D 1.
I haven't, well, I've liked some things I've read on D&D 1. I don't like all of it. I know people are very positive about it. I'm neutral to negative on it. I just don't care about it that much because one, it's not out yet, so I don't have to care.
Yeah.
And two, it just doesn't look that fun to me.
I think that's... I haven't heard as much positive about it. I've been more neutral to slightly negative, it sounds like, for me, for what I've overheard.
I know Cell is pretty positive on it, but it makes changes Cell likes.
I mean, it's fine.
Which is fair. I think the system's... Most of it's fine. There's only a couple things that I hate. I think most of them just neutral. I'm like, yeah, it's alright.
Yeah. So... We'll see more. Honestly, I would like to see more of the Creative Commons stuff for the previous editions. Yeah. Once they actually do that, you know, if they are going to. I mean, again, it's review previous editions for inclusion. That's very, honestly...
It's vague.
Yeah. Like, what previous editions do you mean? You know, 3.5, again, the obvious one.
It makes sense, because Pathfinder. Well,
yeah.
Pathfinder First Edition's not really developed it,
but
it's still sold.
You know, its connection to Pathfinder First Edition is very heavy, so it's the one that's very obvious. And, like, I gotta be honest, I don't think a lot of people publish stuff under 4th Edition.
No,
so that's
4E didn't have a lot of published things, because not a lot of people like 4E.
I mean, honestly, it was the twofold front of, like, the way that they had their, like, you know, policies for 4E combined with, you know, the massive changes they did with 4E that, you know, I feel like were the two nails in the coffin of this entire system. For honestly, a system that, for when I played it, it was fine. Wasn't the kind of D&D I liked, but it wasn't a bad role-playing game if we're just talking role-playing games. Again, one of these days I will have at least, you know, like a one-shot or like a small campaign of it on stream or something just to show off 4E. Just because, you know, it deserves to that at least have some people understand it and see some more stuff on it. But, so, why don't we move on? I feel like that's enough talking about Wizard stuff for the day. Paizo's announced something that's coming out much later in the year, which we'll probably talk about then, but Starfinder Enhanced. It is a 192-page hardcover rules resource that they're going to be putting out in October. New versions of 4 of their classes revised to make them more balanced and easier to play. A bunch of new class features and character options for every class published to date. Some new archetype spells and equipment. Over 90 new feats. Scalable equipment they're putting in there. So something that they're bringing in, actually, I think, for more like probably a little bit of Pathfinder 2e, because they've got the equipment levels to kind of give you an idea. Again, this is something, talking about Pathfinder 2e, just to bring that in. I do like they have equipment levels that gives you an idea of how powerful something is and how close you can give someone an overpowered weapon. But, you know, if it's 3 levels higher, that's different than if it's 10 levels higher. And you can learn that with levels of weapons. Hey. And of course, this is where they're bringing from Pathfinder to Starfinder, Kitsune.
Yeah, you can be a space floof fighting.
Yeah, space floof.
Oh yeah, Star Fox.
You can be Star Fox. I didn't even think of that. That's true. And what the tiny? There's another interesting one. They're saying the shapeshifted Kitsune and the tiny Novians born from the dying suns. What?
The Novians are a thing. So weird.
That's so... God, Starfinder. Starfinder is like they're it's just like Pathfinder. They're like, what's the weirdest idea for like a sci-fantasy we can include? Bam, we've got it.
Yeah, pretty much. I've never played Starfinder. I kind of want to one day.
I've played like a one shot before, so I really need to like dive into it one point in time too. That's another system I should really dive into. Maybe see if I, from one of like the humbles or something, I have like a PDF of like a one-off adventure or something like that, you know, or small adventure. Another one to list under the, I should run this and start actually organizing it. I just don't organize it. Keep thinking about doing it, not doing it.
Yeah,
cough,
you're
cough,
bad
cough.
at organizing.
When I do it, I'm great. I just have to start doing it. I think that's the thing is people have told me, oh, I'm great at organizing. I have to actually just pick myself up and start doing it, and then I go through it. If I don't start... Anyway, no, it's cool. Honestly, I think it's sort of like the... I'm wondering if the new versions of the classes are going to be more akin to like the Unchained they did for original Pathfinder.
Most likely.
Which I mean is good. Taking classes and making them a little bit more easy to play, more balanced and stuff like that, honestly sounds like a great thing to do, especially if they ended up being like a little too complex. Yeah. I think that's the thing is like, if the class is not too difficult, then people like playing it. If it's too difficult, they sometimes might not even use like I gotta be honest. Hey, a summoner. A summoner, you know what I'll use it for? The goddamn Eidolon. Because I don't want to deal with all the other summoning shit.
Fair.
Because it's a lot. Even as a player. So, that's an example of that kind of thing. So, Starfighter Advanced, October. We'll probably learn more about the kind of stuff they're throwing out there.
Probably.
Before that. Have you ever wanted to be a gelatinous cube?
I mean, yeah. Kind of.
Well, Steve Jackson Games has brought us a tiny game called Gelatinous, where you take the role of a wandering slime with the goal of becoming a gelatinous cube. The first one to become a gelatinous cube. They have solitaire rules for this one. They have their own rules that I don't know if they link. They link the solitaire rules, but not the or is the rules on the bag here on the picture? It might actually be. Simple game, silly concept. Let's see here. Each player rolls all their unstacked die. No player with no dice sits out. Stack 3s. Dice start building a 2x2 for 1's pass to the left and pass 6's to the right. And keep repeating until someone gets a cube. That's it.
Yeah, pretty simple.
It's a silly concept in a very simple dice game. And you know what? I'm all for it.
Yeah, fair.
So, hey. There you go. Steve Jackson Games, bring us more stuff like this, please. Thank you.
Gonna make Munchkin.
They did have another Munchkin product, and I was just like, I don't.
Why wouldn't they?
It was too generic for me to care. It wasn't anything interesting. It was just like, whatever. I'm not doing another just random. Oh, I added something to the main Munchkin stuff again, because they do that a lot.
Yeah, they do.
But anyway, all right. So let's see here. This was a browser-based 5e game that was brought to our attention from a good friend of the show. So, just to throw it out there, it's got a lot of days to go.
About 48 days. I think this just launched.
Yeah, it just launched. So very new. Heck of a lot of days to go. So that's the best thing I can say about it for you folks that are seeing it and being like, oh, it's not funded yet. And I do bring you people stuff that's sometimes not funded, and I'm like, it would be interesting, and this is cool, and you probably should look into it if you want to fund it. Anyway, this is one of those things. Browser games. That's kind of an... They're trying to create a GM-less browser-based adventure compatible with the 5e rule set. So the idea is that, I guess it's a little bit of a 5e choose-your-own-adventure.
Yeah, that's kind of what I could think of it as.
Yeah, which is kind of a cool idea, honestly.
You can play the first chapter for free.
Mm-hmm.
It's up right now. I mean, I like the little choose-your-adventure books. There's been, a number of them that have been adapted to video game format.
And honestly, this one that has the air of 5e, where it's a little bit more than just I make a choice. Choose your adventure is I have stats to roll that influence whether my choice is how successful it is and stuff like that.
It's a little bit better than there's a left and a right. Oh, sorry, you picked right. You die. Go back to the start of the book.
Yeah. It's made to be from level 1 to 7. Okay, so it's got meat to it, it sounds like, too.
Yeah.
and 2 to 4 players, which is I'd be interesting if you'd be able to, and I don't know this off the top of my head, but they might say somewhere in here, if you could play online with people a la like a Jaxbox thing, using the browser to play that or something, or if you'd have to all be...
probably could.
Okay. They only say it's 3 hours of gameplay they're aiming. Or no, what does the chapter involve? Each chapter has 3 hours of gameplay. Okay. That's interesting. So it's going to be long, I guess, too. Interesting.
Basically a video game.
It's basically, it's a simple video game that probably feels a lot more 5e than a 5e video game would, I'm going to be honest.
Oh, most likely.
Yeah. Comparing it to something like, one of the Pathfinder video games. The Pathfinder video games are video games at heart, but they throw the veneer of Pathfinder First Edition over top of them. This is probably like more adapting 5e to a video game format. So it'll, if you're more interested in that kind of like more pure thing, certainly it'd be better too. So honestly, neat. It's cool. It was a good thing, very interesting thing Cell brought to our attention. I'm
neat.
all more for shouting it out.
Yeah.
Alright, got a few more topics today. We're getting towards the end of the main topics. Is this the next one on my list? Let me just check. I have to see my order that I had. Because sometimes I like, I've got the right order of like, left to right on my tabs here. Some kind of weird racing board game, which has interesting kind of art style and the idea of these kind of thing. Like, honestly, I like talking about these more creative board games occasionally because they're very different. A racing board game, honestly, is like very... The ones I've known have been very weird, but has war game elements, though, too, because you can attack your other people.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's like... I can't remember it, but I know there's like a racing board game that is very much so like your racing vehicles and stuff. Like you like, I can't remember the exact mechanics of it, but you kind of like, you're playing against yourselves and like the roles or like the random aspect of the game to see how well you do, combined with a couple of choices that you make, which is the strategy. What do I roll? What decision would be best here for my thing? Game of Life well, that's a different kind of race. Lightning. That's a different kind of race.
Hey, Game of Life sucks. It's a terrible game.
It is game.
It doesn't work half the time.
But this one, it's a racing game where you can attack each other, that's kind of interesting. Is Formula 1 the board game I was thinking of? I've heard of Formula 1.
Formula 1 is, a format of racing.
I think there was a board game that was called Formula 1. Let me look that up. Formula 1 board game. It is a board game, yes. I don't know if that's the one I was thinking of, but that is one of the ones. The original one's 1962. So that's like the original one. So the thing is, they've announced this game. They're going to show it off. They're going to be at a bunch of conventions about where they're showing them off. I don't know when the formal release is from Corvus Belli here. I can't see. Where's this Corvus Belli based? I don't know. Anyway, so honestly, if you want to check it out, if you go to one of those conventions, you can actually try it out. So there's a demo of it. And honestly, when the formal release comes out, it actually, we can talk about it more, learn about it more, and it still looks kind of interesting, maybe we'll talk about it then again, But it's got a little bit of interest to it, and they've kind of shouted it out here. And I will shout it out to people who say, hey, this might be something interesting, because it's a unique style of board game, especially because it's combining that kind of something like the Formula 1 board game and a war game. That kind of makes it interesting. Interesting to see how those matches with you're fighting each other too. Look, honestly, I include this topic here just because I was like, oh wait, yes, they now make board games. I forgot about this. I forgot Funko added a board game division. I really had forgotten all about that. Guess what? They've announced a whole bunch of honestly Disney-themed board games. Mostly it looks like for your younger audience with a couple like the all ages things. Simple tabletop games, honestly. A lot of them. I mean, like the big one is their like Disney animated thing, which is 10 plus. Which I don't know much about it. It's produced 5 classic Disney using gilded art fiber. So like I guess animated is you're like in the game. You are basically making animated films, which is kind of interesting.
Hello, my return.
Welcome back. The rest of them are very, very simple games, it seems like. And, of course, the last one on this list is a Funko Pop puzzle, because it's Funko games. They can't get away from Funko Pop-related stuff.
Well, I mean, they're going to have to, because they're just buried, they sent like $30 million worth of product to a landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, honestly, I hate Funko Pop so much.
Oh, God,
They're just terrible.
I'm not for them too. I just, again, like, it was the realization that I'd heard they were into gaming, but to, like, see it, I'm like, oh, wait, I forgot this existed as a company. I was like, oh, yeah. Which is probably not a great thing to think about for a company.
No.
But, you know. It's fine. You know. So, honestly, maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not. You know, we'll see in the future if it's something to, like, what's about it. So, yeah, Funko Pops, not a fan of them. Plenty of people are.
They're just ugly.
They're weird. There are people that
just ugly.
People that collected them like them and stuff, but there are people that collected them like Beanie Babies and a lot of those.
That's what they're plastic, shitty Beanie Babies with less value.
Yeah. They're trying to be a Beanie Baby. I don't know.
Well, they could have been if they didn't make one for every IP that existed. So now that they've had to throw $30 million worth of product in new land, so maybe they've learned a little bit.
Hey, maybe they're going to transfer into this board game thing and do more of these and, like, you know, I don't know. It's probably a terrible idea. Anyway, so last main topic today is an announcement which I heard about on one news site, and they had not a lot of room on it. So then I had to go to Free League Press, because it's an announcement by Free League Press, and they have nothing on their website. So I went to Free League Press Twitter, where they have vaguely in a vague announcement, which is even worse than they did on the first news site, but they link a bunch of articles, and eventually I found one of those articles that actually talks about their product, meaning I don't know where they talked about their product for one of these news sites to talk about their product, because this is the only one that gave me basic information on it. What, didn't you have it on your own website or Twitter? No. So here's the Gaming Gang's news article. I'm going to put their news article in chat here, because out of all the news articles I could find and had to go through, this is the one that had the most information on this announcement for the One Ring role-playing game. You know, it's like, what?
Oh, this site has a lot of pop-ups.
It is a crap ton of pop-ups and ads.
Awful website.
It is an awful website. I'm only saying if you want to read this article with us, I would suggest. If not, this is not the original thing. You don't need a link to it. I'm going to read about what the book is. It's Tales from the Lost Lands. It's supposed to be the northwestern region of Middle-earth.
It's next to the Shire.
Okay.
For people who don't know.
I didn't know.
Hobbit territory.
Okay.
Well, Hobbits, I think, came from there originally, because Hobbits used to wander. I'm gonna go into a deep dive real fast. Hobbits are fucking weird. They didn't exist until the Third Era, Third Age. So why they're in Ring of Power, I don't know. A little rant there about that. But they basically were wandering around, little tiny folks before settling in the Bree land, which is where they live. Creative name, I know. Tolkien was a literary genius. But basically the Lowlands are just kind of empty wilderness where the hobbits came from.
I'm going to tell you one thing here also. just to back up Tolkien here. I'm great at the creative things I do, so I assume he was great at coming up with, like, he was a linguist, the languages and stuff. I have shit naming skills. I assume he's the exact same way. He's like, it's the Breelands.
It was both the 30s and 40s, and he was also making a mythology, which, spoilers, if you've ever read a mythology, the names are shit in mythology. They always are. They're just the dumbest names.
But, like, yes, I will read about the book, because maybe you don't have to go to this website, and this was the only place I could find the about the book section. Sort of like, what is this book about? Sort of, they talk about it. And now I've gone into far into the lone lands, where there are no people, no inns, roads are steadily worse. Not far away were dreary hills, rising higher and higher, dark with trees. Some of them were old castles with an evil look, as they've been built by wicked people. So that's the kind of like little blurb on the back. It's for the second edition of the One Ring role-playing game. 6 brand new adventures set in the Lone Lands, which you informed me where they were. Great.
Yeah, they're near... You know where Bree is? You remember the village of Bree from the movie, where they go to the inn and meet Aragorn? It's, like, next to that.
Yeah, so it's basically like... I would almost have to think then of, like, the Bree is the civilized lands on the border of this territory.
Yeah, the Bree lands are, like, the civilized lands, and then next to the Bree land, there's the Shire and shit. Yeah, so it's like we got the Bree lands, Shire, and then, like, somewhere in that room, I can't say, like, north of them, because honestly I don't have a map in front of me, but it's somewhere... East.
East of them. So, east of them, this, very strange, like, wild lands that have been long since abandoned or something.
I don't believe anyone lives there. I think it's all ruins. It's been a while since I've read those books.
Yes. So all adventures of Tales of the Lone Lands expansion assume that the time frame is the same as the one in the One Ring RPG. Years around 2965. I don't know what that means for... Again, if I would know more, I could... Wait.
I think that's when the war started. Okay. Kind of. Maybe. It's the Third Age for sure.
We know of the names and a little bit of 4 of the 6 adventures. I think it's supposed to be here. They said. Let me just check. I think I just read that. Yes, 6 adventures. Okay. The expansion includes a troll hole, if there ever was one, and kings of Little Kingdom. Okay, no, there's 2 different ones. Oh no, there's 3 different ones. Is that 3 different ones? A troll hole, if there ever was one.
It looks like, judging by punctuation, it seems like there are 3.
Yeah, and Kings of Little Kingdoms. Suffocating adventures, but hint of a growing danger. Messing about in boats. It involves director or one member of the company in an expected way. No. These are really weird names. Not to Strike Without Need, and Wonder of the Northern World, spokesperson spies of the enemy, and The Quest for Amun Gurthos, challenges here to battle an ancient evil. Like, that's at least really...
I mean, these are very Tolkien names.
As soon as you said it, I'm like, God damn it, of course they are.
These are Tolkien chapter names. Tolkien did a lot of musical things and rhymes in his books.
Yeah. There are 7 things listed here, and they said there was 6. Is one of these...
7 things here.
The thing is, they said 6 brand new adventures. Maybe one of these, because this is 2nd edition of One Ring, maybe one of these is a remake from 1st edition of One Ring.
Maybe. Or one of these is like a combined name.
But it's hard to tell because of punctuation.
Punctuation is hard.
And these names are very weird and Tolkien-y.
It is very Tolkien.
Tolkien! I don't need to swear like Revenge on You, but I'm going to shake my fist to the air.
Well, Revenge isn't going to do much. He's been dead for a long time.
I know, but like, maybe one day, like, Tolkien, I shall punch your grave!
Look, man, Amazon's already ruined his stuff. I think you can leave him alone.
Nah.
Amazon already made a kind of bad TV show. I think you're good.
I guess I really don't need to, it's just that, I've sworn revenge against this man. "Ugh!" and you just like punch some dirt, and it's just like, what are you doing? I'm punching his grave. Why? I can't remember why, but I was angry with him at one point in time. Look, I'm just gonna be silly and just say no. We're not gonna punch Polkin's grave today.
Yeah, you did like good stuff mostly. You wrote some bad stuff. Like, it was just garbage, but you know, the 4 Lord of the Rings books, pretty good. Good, but hard to read nowadays.
Also going to say, like, first half of the century of the 20th century, not a great time period to be around and writing stuff.
He fought a war.
So
he was in World War One, so you know, he was also old. So some of his views are not great, because that's just how it was back then.
Fucking hellworm. Oh my god.
That's true. between the Peter Jackson movies and what Amazon did, yeah, he's like spinning at Mach speed.
God damn it.
I know the Peter Jackson movies might be good, but they're terrible adaptations.
Yeah, no. Look, I've made jokes about Gary Gygax rolling his grave, but I gotta be honest, the way TSR was run, he's like, yes, wizards, you're doing my bidding.
He's probably okay with what Wizard was trying to do.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. Hi, let's have a deeper discussion topic. I had some ideas about one, and I want to pull out one. That's an interesting one in here from a little farther back. I did add a couple new ones. I added 2 different ones because I talked about, if you missed it, on Thursday this week, I talked about the cosmology of the world of darkness, which is just weird and kind of religious, but also kind of not, depending on where you're coming from. And it's just complex, and only have to use it as much as you want to dive into it. But I added 2 religious/belief topics to this entire chart here at the bottom end there, because we haven't talked about that kind of thing. And it is an aspect, especially when we know, hey, talk about on Wednesday, we have a war priest of a deity. It comes up just in subtle ways like that, and so there's deeper thoughts to it. Anyway, but no, that's not this week. Those were new topics to the list that we will eventually get to. I'm going to talk about something because I've also kind of hit up on a couple of things. Let's talk about technology as part of your setting, because that's important to talk about, because it makes a big difference on the levels of technology and what it means.
Yeah. It does.
And it oftentimes makes a big chance depending on the kind of era you're in. Like, if I'm in a D&D or, Pathfinder world, because they're a little different, I would say something like a Forgotten Realms, a Greyhawk, and something feels a little bit more still tail end of the Middle Ages, where things are coming out of, like, Dark Age. Granted, they're written to be kind of that way, but that's kind of what they feel like. While a Pathfinder is close to that, but it is very early Renaissance.
Yeah.
Because things like gunpowder are becoming into existence in the world, and things like that. And a lot more creativity and stuff than, like, say, something like just the way it's built. Just trust me, more Renaissance. But again, it's also that weird thing of Galarian as a post-apocalyptic world where there's super advanced technology.
Yeah.
Where there is, honestly, you could pick up something from a civilization that had, normal guns.
Like cyborg legs.
Cyborg legs. Laser weapons. Actual just normal pistols. Like all this kind of stuff that has various levels. Pathfinder treats it very nicely. They're magic items.
Yeah.
They have their different levels. They have their different challenges. They're kind of like magic items because they're not the normal technology. So that's a discussion that's like, okay, maybe there is technology in my world because of an ancient civilization. It's akin to the magic we have. It might be just purely technological. It might be some kind of magic tech. If you want to go very like Final Fantasy, which oftentimes has like magic technology and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it has an essence to it, and it like oftentimes is a lost technology. So rare. We really have to talk about this when you start getting into equivalent to our time period, more modern eras.
Hi, how are you doing? That's my setting.
Mm-hmm.
So, my setting, which I've lovingly crafted, is a world built upon many societies that fell to various apocalypses. Can't say what those were because it'd be spoilers for my D&D game, but basically they're currently God, have you played Mass Effect? I don't think you have.
I have not.
Do you know like the whole Prothean thing where it's like all the technology's based on this long dead alien race?
I have heard that. I know the very basics of hearing that.
That's basically what my world is all much of the current technology, which they're currently up to the steam age. So they have like coal power, gunpowder, things like that, is based on things they have found in these long lost ruins. So they're getting all their technology from. But I mean, like, there's more there. My party discovered a crashed spaceship in that world.
Yeah.
And they got a laser from it and some modern body armor. I just treat those as magic items.
Yeah.
Because they're like super advanced. But when you put these in your world, you have to think of the implications that has for your world. Because like, yeah, I could just say, sure, a spaceship crashed here, and then not go with anything beyond that. Because realistically, the party's not going to ever go to space to find anything. Because, I mean, that's getting into spell jamming, which is a whole fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's boring, and I think they should expand on stuff like that more.
I think the thing is, it's very easy for technology to be something like, it's akin to a magic item, it's very rare, it's something like that, it's not something normal in my world. The thing is, though, you can have worlds where it becomes more normal, but as soon as a lot of these technologies become more normal, they change the dynamic of the world. Even in, like, I'm going to tell you, like, if I'm playing World of Darkness, which is set in a version of modern-day world, think about what we have in our world today, 2023. There's so much levels of technology and stuff that it makes it so much more complex to think about. Yeah. And also, like, what your characters can just do. Sure, a vampire character has some abilities that are akin to, like, the powers of a D&D character, has some stats and stuff, and they can do some crazy stuff. Oh, I can make myself kind of disappear into shadows, I can turn into a rat, you know, things like that. Or we can just go get a shotgun somewhere and a cell phone and, like, videotape some things, or hey, I have some drones. You know, it's sort of like we have stuff which is the technology level just makes the weirdness level sometimes like it's hard to fit together sometimes in a way that makes it make sense. You know, like World of Darkness is just kind of like you're modern day, forget about it. You know about modern day, it's okay. You know. Do I know enough about modern day, technically?
I mean, I assume you know enough about tech. I mean, you'll just Google how tech works.
I mean, that's the one thing about that, playing in a world like that. It's a modern world, especially one that's a version of our modern world. You can Google so much to help you out.
Yeah.
If you're running a game just on Earth, you're going to have to deal with just on Earth a lot.
Just Earth things.
Yeah.
You can easily handwave so much if you just run on Earth. Because, like, you're modern people, you know how this shit works.
Yeah. There is also, of course, like, when you deal with something like, honestly, like Shadowrun, which has, or even something more akin to, like, Starfinder, which has future tech.
Yeah.
Where like, I feel like it becomes more integral to your character at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you get beyond what our normal conventions are. Because our normal conventions are great, but, like, I've got to admit, our normal conventions, as powerful as our technology is right now, which is very powerful, like, if I compare it a lot of times to something like vampire characters, it's there, it's helpful, it's not, it can maybe replace it sort of, and maybe be a challenge sort of,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like, you know, integral to my character to have, you know, the best cell phone, or the best this, you know, or like something other than just like a pistol sometimes. You know, that's not critical to your character, because the nature of our world is deadly, but like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of level of like, I guess, supernatural versus firepower. Like, it's the same, like, if I would take, you know, D&D stuff and put it in a modern world, you know, yeah, D&D stuff can be very powerful. You can have some really powerful spells there and stuff like that. But there is some really powerful, like, modern world stuff that can kind of balance it out a lot of times, too, you know? I think that's the kind of thing where it's like, it's when you get into that future technology where things feel less balanced between the two. And I think that's when it becomes like an interesting thing. If you're going to more futuristic, more very heavily sci-fi, whether it's sci-fantasy or pure sci-fi, you're dealing with technology which goes beyond our imagination into, you know, the science fiction, where it's supposed to be kind of scientific, but we're making some shit up. You know, it's based on scientific ideas if it's well-made sci-fi. Not always well-made sci-fi.
Nope. Well, I mean, when you're doing that kind of world, you also have to think of how, see, the world of magical creatures, how do they interact with technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in my cyber fantasy setting, dragons exist. You know what dragons don't do? They don't fly around in big dragon form and burn things anymore, because surface to air missiles exist, right? They just don't do that. Because they'll die. Because a dragon might be tough, but it's not tougher than a SAM missile. You know? It's not tougher than a missile designed to blow up a metal airplane.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There are having dove back into things like Shadowrun, they're goddamn the greater dragons. They do have armor that are like absorb like normal missiles and stuff. Those things are fucking scary. But good news in the Shadowrun world is, turns out when a greater dragon became violent, all the other greater dragons decided, I guess we cannot fight each other for a while and get together and be like, hey now, the rest of us like manipulating mortals. Stop this. You know?
And guess what dragons do in my cyber punk setting? They run the fucking banking systems because they're dragons.
Yeah, it's kind of the same kind of thing as you think about dragons in a future world. They're gonna be like, we can just do what we do best, but also like not get involved. You know, banking, manipulating, you know, corporations and stuff. Earn us money without us having to do anything. We're just gonna sit here and own you and just, you know, you do your thing and great. Earn us some more wealth to lie on. Does it have to be electronic? I'm just gonna buy all the gold with my electronic money. Don't worry about it.
Dragons would invent Bitcoin and NFTs. They would. Especially chromatics.
The chromatics definitely would. They're like, yes, crypto bros, support us. I think it's just the idea that, you know, technology is a scary thing because it opens up a lot of interesting options and connects the world a lot, you know. Certainly, different eras of technology work differently, but they always replace a lot of, like, the need for a lot of, like, like, physical abilities a lot of times, and also, like, well, I was saying, like, sometimes, like, mystical, like, magical abilities, if you have those in your world.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't become that much of an issue until you start getting into technology that's the equivalent of, like, atomic era onward. That's when the world changed, like, a lot. I mean, if you're doing, like, modern history tech, like 1800s to 1900s, yeah, you're gonna be dealing with, like, pretty hefty firepower, but it's still mostly, like, pretty not advanced societies in terms of technology.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, maybe some, like, if you're doing, like, actual, like, Wild West, late 1800s kind of era, you might get into some interesting things there. But, I gotta be honest, there are some examples of that kind of stuff out there if you want to reference it and learn about that kind of stuff. Hey, good old Werewolf the Apocalypse. You know what they did? A Werewolf Wild West version of themselves.
Yeah.
I learned this week they crossed over with Deadlands.
They did.
So Deadlands is technically part of the World of Darkness, if you really believe that? That's weird.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
It's really weird.
If you're doing, like, in general, if you're doing a tech fantasy setting, I don't advise... You don't want to put, like, a lot of thought into it. I don't advise going beyond the Industrial Revolution, because that's when you start getting into things like machine guns, tanks, airplanes, computers, cell phones, and you have to really think about how those affect the game.
Yeah. And again, as I said, modern's easy because we're in modern.
Yeah.
You know, that's the easy one. A different era, like if I wanted to do, like, I was alive during the 1980s. If I wanted to write a 1980s game, I'm honest, I don't know if I could run a 1980s game.
No.
I don't remember enough about how, like, I remember the basics, like, I remember the big stuff, but there's plenty of little technological things that are probably from the 1980s that I'd be like, that was in the 1980s? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know? It's been a long time.
It has been a long time since the 80s.
I mean, honestly, like the 2010s I might have trouble with, because it's been like 5 years ago, like what the hell was I doing? I mean, like 5 years ago I was doing this very early on with Joe. I mean, like the earliest show was fucking Joe on a laptop in my dining room for a couple of shows. Took me a bit before I got into this nice room here, you know. But yeah, no. And honestly, like, I like Shadowrun, but I like Shadowrun because it provides me most of the shit I need to know about future tech combined with stuff. Same with, like, something like a Starfinder. It combines information of, here's your technology, here's your magic, here's how they differ, here's how they same, and it also, like, here's how these things work a little bit, in general terms. You don't have to figure out how these things fit into your world. Someone provided it for you.
Yeah. I mean, like, I have a lot of experience with the cyberpunk genre, so that's where I default to when I do a future setting is cyberpunk, because that to me is it's a no-brainer. It's easy. I can make one of those in like an afternoon. Right. But if I was doing like space travel and like Star Trek level stuff, I'm like, I don't even know where to fucking begin with that, dude.
Yeah. I think it's like, if we take a look, because you have a little bit more experience of adapting things than I do, at least more of lately. Like your Cyberpunk game, which we talked about, you know, that was pretty good. But when I'm coming back and thinking about it, we kept things simple.
It was a very simple game.
Like, there wasn't a lot of... There was the technology there. We didn't really discuss the technology or use the technology unless it came up directly. Yeah. Like, we have this idea of a cyberpunk world, which helps us imagine it. But that's the thing is, for someone that might not have as much familiarity, it wouldn't have been as good for them because
it would have been difficult for them to get immersed.
Yeah.
Into that kind of world.
Like, I'm familiar with both Cyberpunk, the actual game as a setting, and Shadowrun. Those are, like, very heavily inspired on the kind of style that, like, you know, they're very similar style, but that style is the, like, pure Cyberpunk kind of style a lot of times. I can recognize them, and this is the kind of way things would look and work in general.
Yeah, my requirement, I had one requirement for that game, and it was, have you at least seen Blade Runner? And if you did, you were able to play, because you've seen Blade Runner, you know Cyberpunk.
I think I haven't seen Blade Runner since the late 80s.
I mean, I've not watched it in, 15 years.
I don't know if I actually saw the entire thing, too. That's the thing
I've seen it, you've seen parts of it.
Yeah, I've seen parts of it enough. I may have been kind of as a younger person, going in and out of my parents watching it or something, that kind of
one
thing.
One of my favorite movies. I've not seen it so long. Also, there's 5 versions of it. The sequel's pretty good.
I think that's the thing is by the time I thought about coming back to it, there's 5 versions of it. There's a lot of stuff, and I'm like,
you could look up which one you're supposed to watch.
But it was also
I don't remember off the top of my head which fucking one it is.
There's certain movies that I'm like, I probably should have watched this, or maybe I did. I don't remember enough to do, and I'm like, I don't know if I'll do it. Maybe that might be a thing to do in the future. Rewatch Blade Runner after these billion years.
It's a pretty good one.
There's probably a small list of those that I probably should come back to.
I think there's a Blade Runner anime as well.
There is, I believe. You are correct. Did I see that one?
I don't watch it. I watched Edge Runners. It was pretty good.
Depending on how old it is. I've seen some
I think it's new. New as in the last 10 years.
Yeah. 2021. Okay. I don't know if I saw that one then. That I can't remember. Black Lotus.
Yeah, I know I saw some people praising it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah.
I just don't watch anime.
Oh, it was last year. Well, it's I watch a lot less nowadays than I did, 10 years ago or something like this.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, I do have to admit, this season has been an exception, just because there's been a lot more just all-right stuff,
Fair.
So, I can get, my, in quotations, TV watching in of, some, pretty okay anime and a few decent ones, Nothing that blows me out of the water, but a lot of times there's seasons, 2 or 3 things I watch during a season, so it's 2 or 3 episodes a week. This is probably one a day, kind of, at least, so it's an exception. But so I certainly can point out there's a lot of weird anime versions of properties that I've certainly seen. As a small side tangent, I've seen the Highlander one, which was a futuristic version of Highlander. So it's Highlander in the cyberpunk world.
Of course it is.
I did see the Witchblade one.
Which one was Witchblade?
It was a comic series with a lady that gets weird mystical powers and stuff, but gets also scantily clad, kind of thing.
I think I have seen this one.
There might have been an actual live action TV series or something based on it or something. I know the comic book.
Some cover art. Okay.
Yeah. I was watching a lot of random anime at that point in time, and it was an okay story, kind of weird. I saw all the back in the late early 2000s, all of the weird Marvel animes. They did.
Yeah, they did do those.
They did do those. There was I remember Iron Man, Wolverine, Blade, and one other I can't remember. I remember the other ones because Iron Man was the first one, and the Wolverine one because I like Wolverine's and then Blade because vampire hunting, of course. But anyway, digressing from that a little bit there. Back to our topic at hand. Yeah, so having a familiarity with something like Blade Runner, and again, I'm not saying it's hard nowadays to find someone that doesn't have a basic idea of a lot of things, like what cyberpunk is. Hey, the cyberpunk game came out, and it was, had its ups and downs, but a lot of people, especially people in the sphere that would probably pick up a tabletop game, know about that.
Let me tell you. I mean, that game came out bad, but, there was just something about being able to walk around Night City and see it.
Sure, and that's the thing, is I know that there were versions of the game that worked a lot better, and people enjoyed it, had a lot of fun with it, and honestly, I've looked at it and be
good now.
cool.
But pretty good now. Although you kind of need a good computer to run it because one of those big. You need a decent amount of RAM.
Look, I've been worried about picking up Sons of the Forest, and that's not the same kind of game. Just because I've heard about it.
Well, I mean, that's just not going to work because it's a janky ass early access game.
It also apparently just destroys your ability.
It does. I've heard. I heard it's very laggy if you don't have a good computer.
It's like this. It's I might wait till it's optimized a little bit more, but then I remember, hey, the original Forest was not well optimized.
The original Forest was garbage.
I liked that game. It's just optimized to shit. Yeah. It's just the thing that, like, future technology has a lot of different levels to it, and it becomes more of like a what's your imagination at that point in time and stuff, and I guess it's sort of like, and Worm's right about it. That's one of those things. It's kind of like almost making like magic sound more believable, because again, like, I could equate, like, if I took Star Trek, I could probably equate a lot of their weird technology and stuff to very magic-y based things in D&D, honestly. Oh hey, they create walls of force and use teleportation spells, and they create illusions you can interact with to entertain yourselves, and they can create food and water for you pretty easily, and yes, I add the spin of this is sci-fi, but again, like, that's taking things to a little bit more of extreme. Hey, Star Trek levels of sci-fi are way out there.
Star Trek sci-fi is, I'm just gonna say it, Star Trek is amazing. It's not good sci-fi in the terms of science, because most of the stuff isn't explainable.
Technobabble?
It's mostly technobabble.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a replicator just wouldn't work without some pretty advanced tech, and they've never explained how it works, so.
Mm-hmm.
Also, teleporting is terrifying when you think about it.
Oh, yeah. It really is. It makes me understand more, like, why, was it Bones that hated teleportation?
It was Bones, I think, who hated the transport.
Yeah, and it makes you, like, when you actually think about it more, I feel like I'm more on his grounds of, like...
no, I would never use that thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take the shuttle, thanks.
Yeah. So, like, yeah. That becomes akin to, like, a lot level of, like, you start circling back around to magic when you go to something like levels of Cyberpunk, where it's just, like, our world, but to a couple degrees more.
Like, Cyberpunk is easier to imagine now, because we already have a lot of the basic Cyberpunk tech. We have things like cybernetic limbs. We've invented those.
Mm-hmm.
They're working, several companies are working on chipware, basically.
Yeah.
More or less.
I remember, I think it was back in how long ago was it? It was one of my times during Temple. I don't know if it was the first or second one. The time I went to Temple. It was, I was working on a project for a class, and it was like, it was something I did for, I had to do kind of like one of those, like, it's within a certain degree, but it's an elective kind of thing for your degree. It's sort of like this level of type. And so I did like an intro engineering, which qualified under my type of choices for this. Like, it's technically for my degree, but it's also like in a certain grouping, so it's not an exact one. And I remember I dove into, and so this is like quite many years ago, talking about someone that was developing like a external like thing you could kind of hook up to the back of your head that allowed you to control a robotic limb.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that was like 10 years ago, maybe.
That was mind-blowing back then.
Yeah, so I'm like, this is really cool, because this is like a non-invasive way, if you wanted to have a limb and then control it. Because this wasn't even patching it to someone at the time. This was just, can I connect this to me and then control this like an arm or something, you know. And it wasn't like super well developed at the time, and I'm sure, hey, 10 years on, we're getting into things where like we can control arms like this. You can have grippers.
10 years on, like now, like bionic arms and cybernetic limbs are so advanced now, and it just didn't last 10 years. It's incredible how fast technology develops like that.
Yeah. And we just have to think like, yes, certainly if we're talking like, you know, the 2070s, 2080s, which are like, you know, Cyberpunk and Shadowrun are around those time frames, yes, they're going to be much more advanced. But, I mean, both of those worlds went through some shit which might have, like, both accelerated things and slowed things down in ways, you know? They're not post-apocalyptic, they're, what's the term for it?
Cyberpunk is also technically all history.
Yeah, it is also alt history. Well, Shadowrun starts... I didn't realize Shadowrun started in the 80s until I did that history thing. I thought it started in the 90s for alternate history. No, it started in the 80s. And I think Cyberpunk's similar. They're... it's not apocalyptic. It's dystopian! Thank you, Worm. Yeah. That's what it is. They're both dystopian worlds. Which, I mean, that's a very negative way of looking at things. I can't say whether or not we're going to end up in a dystopian world. There's a chance of it that's not gone away because of the way things have gone.
The big thing is Shadowrun diverges in the 80s, but Cyberpunk diverges in the 90s.
Okay. I mean, it depends on how much they diverge, too. Because I think the Shadowrun stuff was very mild stuff in the 80s. I think that the two things that I noticed that were big things, which were impactful, was the one Supreme Court Chief Justice didn't step down during the bicentennial.
Yeah.
Which was important because then someone else chose his replacement rather than, I think, start working, Reagan.
Yeah.
So, you know, Reagan chose someone that, in our world, Reagan chose someone appropriate to Reagan. This is going forward like 10 years when that person stayed around, someone appropriate to that person chose someone, and that person that was in the office at the time of presidency in the alternate world, much more extreme. The other divergence was the original George Bush didn't win his election, the Democrat won. And then that changed things afterwards. We didn't get a Bill Clinton. We got like an extremist Republican during the 90s in the Shadowrun world, who then had a much more extreme than who Reagan chose to lead the Supreme Court when we got to important Supreme Court decisions, which altered the path of Shadowrun's world significantly.
Yeah.
You know, that's where it diverges. It's really like a couple of political changes meant that it set up for major, like, world-shattering decisions that were laid down that were super abused.
Yeah, the big thing about when this is super off topic, one of the big changes is that in Cyberpunk, the Cold War never ended. The USSR didn't collapse. That's the big changes. Gorbachev successfully stabilizes it, and he names a successor. So it doesn't collapse, and a second Cold War begins in the 90s. That's the big divergent point.
That's a pretty big one. So it is kind of around the same time. That
it isn't possible for a number of reasons, but it's fun.
Again, like, I mean, like, Shadowrun... The weird thing is, part of Shadowrun's thing feels possible, especially nowadays, like, because just the way people treat corporations. There are some things that would have to happen that would be very extreme, but honestly, some of those decisions and the way they were made kind of unfortunately make sense.
Yeah.
One of those decisions was, hey, a bunch of rioters who were basically in like some kind of like a food riot that basically happened because of various reasons, which I'm not saying that couldn't happen in the US, that'd be very difficult to happen, but certainly I'm sure if a lot of crazy things happen, it could. Like natural disasters, major infrastructure breaks, that could happen accidentally. There could be food riots. There was one on medical waste. The people defending the medical waste defended it by, I don't know, using firepower because they're like, we would rather kill these people than like a ton of medical waste getting out and contaminating this area. When the government tried to hold them responsible for killing people, They took it to the Supreme Court, and they earned their right to, shoot things a lot more.
Ooh.
And that was the first of two steps, which led him down a dark path for Shadowrun.
Which is very unlikely to ever happen in the real world.
But that's the thing is,
all history doesn't have to be realistic. By the way.
All history doesn't have to be realistic. This is like one of those weird ones that I'm like, could something this crazy happen? Unfortunately, like nowadays, I could say certainly things of that caliber could happen. Would they? No, that the chances of this kind of thing are like 3 billion to 1 things happening in a row. For this kind of thing to happen, it would have to be the right circumstances combined with the right. A couple
of American amendments would need to be removed first, which wouldn't happen.
Well, the way that they defended it in the world of Shadowrun is they eventually managed to argue that a corporation security force counted as a well and regulated militia.
Yeah, that wouldn't fly in real life.
Oh no, I don't think it would.
Not even with the most crazy of people. But hey,
honestly, there's some crazy people in the U.S. that I would say would do it, but they're not in power, fortunately.
No.
Their friends who are next to them are not quite as crazy, but are pretty crazy in power. They're 1 degree less of crazy. Thank you, degree less of crazy people that we have. God, we have too many crazies in the U.S.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just too many crazies. Anyway, different entire problem. Technology, we're back to that. That was a weird digress in a lot of ways.
Very strange.
It's a thing.
Tech's an important aspect to your world.
Yeah.
You're always going to have it. Just be prepared for the consequences of putting it in.
Mm-hmm. Scraping my food a little bit. Don't worry that.
And then, obviously, if you have modern tech in a fantasy setting, you can describe it in dumb ways to your players, which is really good. Like, when my players found a cell phone, I just described it as a tiny black mirror that they have in their pocket. Some of the descriptions I come up with are great, because these are fantasy characters who don't know what a computer is.
I mean, it's really fun to do that kind of stuff. You have to cut it off at some point. I did that during Records of Evil, some of that stuff, and it was fun. But it was also like I had to limit it at some point in time.
The cutoff point now is that they've reactivated. They have an AI friend that they have given a body, so that I can just explain to them what this technology is now.
See, that's a lot cooler than I gave him an imp with a laptop. He's an imp. He learned how to use a laptop on his own.
They took an AI out of a crashed spaceship and then put it in a robot body that they found in another part of the crashed spaceship. So they have a guide for technology now.
Isn't that nice? Yeah, no. Introducing technology to people that don't really know it. That's a funny thing. That's a different discussion whatsoever. But I'm going to say don't overdo that either.
No,
you got to be.
It's a funny joke for a little bit.
It's a funny joke for a session, maybe 2. Then you have to calm down and just actually play the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, technology is always an interesting concept, but it's also again, it's even if I'm talking D&D and stuff like that. Hey, good old Faerun has some stuff out there that your players could run into. Hey, guns exist in Faerun, and technically airships do too. Now, the airships are kind of got some, I think, magic in them too, but again...
They're magical.
But still, they're a magic technology. Yeah. That's something different than what they would normally encounter. That is a thing in a magic world. You can have magic technology. I talked about that before. So, your random dudes in Faerun could encounter, these guys got guns, or what the fuck, there's a flying ship. It's not like it can't happen. So you can have those things that are technology, even in the most classic D&D worlds, or fantasy worlds, I should say, in general. So, anyway, why don't we talk about our week this I think that was a pretty good dive into technology on its side, because it's a thing. You'll worry about it. Don't worry. How was your Sunday?
Pretty good. We beat up some ghosts.
Ooh.
In a mansion. Cell continues to roll bad.
I mean, that's
Jay, who is an artificer, also rolls bad, but
mm,
that's not Jay's fault because Jay doesn't have his attack stat yet. He doesn't get that to level 3.
okay.
His artificers certain artificers at level 3 use their intelligence as their attack stat for like melee attacks and shit. We're not level 3, we're level 2. We beat up ghosts.
I am going to make a joke here. Did one of you wear green overalls while doing it?
No, but I did in character joke about maybe we should bring a vacuum because it's the modern world and video games exist in real life. Like Luigi's Mansion is an actual video game.
Because you are Earth, yeah.
I did make that joke that we should bring a vacuum cleaner.
Yep. I accept that. I had a Monday game. What the hell would we all do? Oh my god, my brain is just fried from that day. I have to try to remember what happened. Yeah, we had the Monday. This was like I remember the one session before. We were working on determining what to do with the map information. It was research. It was research day. That's why my brain was shut off a lot.
Research day.
Yeah, like it was a little thing like you're God. Sometimes I blank out on what's going on with all the research and stuff. But it was research day. We dove into a lot of the stuff that we're figuring out things based on the information we have and making determinations, et cetera, et cetera. Because I think we were looking into the map and the language on the map and stuff like that to because we finally have access to it kind of. And also I believe there was breaking into the more into the computer systems of the museum. We were for trying to see if they've got more information, things like that. We were all trying to get more information so that we have a bigger picture of this map and key we're looking for and trying to figure it out and stuff like that, and following the map and key kind of route. So it was a very research heavy day. That's right. It's all coming back to me now. Tuesday, did you have a Tuesday?
Tuesday, yeah, we finished up stuff, and my faction has left the star system entirely, just abandoning it because everything's on fire, and we need to go deal with our homeworld.
Yeah.
That was basically the session was dealing with that, and then we're going to the last planet before we end.
Ooh.
Because we need to rescue 2 people and probably beat up an asshole.
Eat some
and that's it for that game. Just maybe 1 or 2 sessions left.
Okay.
The planet is also Dutch, and a mining world.
Okay.
And the DM immediately regretted that decision because he can't do a Dutch accent and doesn't want to. I don't even know what a Dutch accent sounds like, outside of the shitty one from Austin Powers.
Dutch is a little Scandinavian because they are technically... The Netherlands is technically kind of related to that. It's not quite Denmark, because Denmark really is Scandinavian. Dutch is somewhere in between that and I think maybe a little bit of French, because Belgium's next to there.
It's right next to France and Germany.
And Belgium. Everybody forgets Belgium.
Oh, Belgium sucks.
Belgium brought us Hercule Poirot. That's the only thing I remember.
I mean, Belgium is fine, but I have an ex from there, so I hate it.
Ah.
Also, it's politically awful.
Oh, I'm sure.
They don't have a government currently.
Ah.
They might have a government now, but I know for a couple of years they just didn't have a ruling party. Because they have the problem of they have too many political parties.
Oh, that's... God. I know.
The Netherlands also has that problem.
I mean, there's plenty of... There's too many or too little, honestly. There has to be a balance.
You can have too many.
You can have too many, you can have too little.
The sweet spot is 4 or 5.
Yeah.
They have 20.
That's an issue. 20 is a lot. But... So yeah, that sounds like an attempt. Honestly, my accents are terrible. I can do a couple of them. They're going to be bad no matter what, but I can attempt them.
You just have to accept that most of the time your accent's going to be insensitive.
Yeah. I can certainly try for accenting. Wednesday.
Yeah.
Wednesday was one of those things where I was like, the thing is, at the end of last week, I'm like, okay, I'll take a look at this thing. There's a good chance they might do a fight with it. And then somewhere along the way, because I'd already kind of said, like, this is the thing that's there, this is it. And I looked at it, I'm like, I don't know if I want them to fight this thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh wait, waves of exhaustion.
I know those
gross.
Do. I've thought them before. They're awful.
I was like, because I think I was misthinking it until last week. I kept thinking it was waves of fatigue.
No.
Which suck, but isn't that bad in comparison.
Fatigue is manageable. Exhaustion is death.
Yeah. Because I think it's not only is it you -6, but I think you're also, like, staggered or something, too. And I'm like, so, not only would you all get one attack a turn, you'd also have -6, and I'm like, yeah, like, if you had 2 people that had, like, a lot of blasty spells, maybe, I could see making up for it or something. Or, like, something like a rogue, which can do a big sneak attack still. But you have 3 physical fighters and a ranged fighter.
The big thing with that creature is, it is technically, I think it's like CR 14?
It is a CR 14.
The problem with that is, the room it was in increased its CR, because there was no way to not get hit by it.
It was a very tiny room where you couldn't avoid it, yeah.
Yeah. It was just a really bad environment to fight the thing. This continues the theme of old PS Adventures having dumb monsters shoved in bad environments for them to be fought in.
Certainly if the room was bigger.
The monster makes sense to be there lore-wise, but the room they stuck a huge-sized creature in a 20 by 20 room.
Yeah, no, I'll agree on that one. It was not, like, their description of the room is like, oh, this could be such a big room, and then you, like, look at the room on the map, and you're like, this is such a dinky room.
If it was a large-sized version of this thing without the waves of exhaustion, then it's fightable.
Honestly, I think that would probably reduce it to, like, maybe, like, CR 13 or something.
Yeah. It's still deadly because of its bite curse.
Yeah.
But it's fightable at that point.
And all its attacks cause bleeding, which kind of sucks.
Because, I could have just staggered it for 3 rounds.
Yeah.
Because I had 4 burrowing bullets. So I could just kept doing that as needed. But yeah, those monsters are specifically have to be run very carefully, or they will be a TPK monster. The buffs are just too rough.
Like, I'm fine with how tall the room was, but a much bigger, like, wide
Maybe
room.
wider.
I think the thing is, like, it has a long reach, and they're like, hey, if you're up in the tunnel, to get an angle, you're probably still going to be within its reach of, like, its, like, claws and stuff. So I'm like, okay, so, like, that's fine. I'm fine with that. That tells you, like, a ranged fighter still has to get into a danger zone. But, like, as Lightning's saying, a 50-50 room, which is down there 50-50, and, like, yes, even if it's up on the ceiling, it can reach you and stuff like that. And, there's nowhere to hide vertically, but horizontally, yeah. There could be some possibilities to avoid it. That would have been better. Because it shoved everybody up in it.
I didn't like... the session was fun, and this isn't on you, but I really did not like having to basically beg people to listen to you not to fight this fucking thing.
It's sort of like... there was, like, some good suggestions, and, like, I'm like... the thing is, when it said stuff, there was no attempt for diplomacy, which kind of surprised me. So it was like, okay, can I make a diplomacy check to try to convince it differently? No, it was sort of like, well, it said that, let's just fight it then. I'm like, what?
Yeah. I had to convince people to be diplomatic with it.
It's the thing is, like, I was hoping that, like, yes, your team is very aggressive, and I understand that. But there was this level of, like, when you were talking beforehand, we were going to try to be diplomatic. That traditionally means, hey, let's change something's attitude with a diplomacy check. And then when we got to the actual game, I feel like that didn't happen at all.
You'd eventually do it after me basically demanding it.
I mean, like, let's withdraw and talk about it, let's make a diplomacy check, rolled really well, and I was like, holy crap, that's great for you. You've already changed his attitude to, like, a bit more of, like, neutral, I will listen to you, so, like, you know, you could back away. That was a really good check. And, like, actually, like, talking about that check, and certainly at that point in time, it could have said no.
Yeah.
You know, I made it not hostile. I made it, like, just one level below the maximum hostility. So it's not going to attack you unless it needs to, but it's, like, on edge with you people, you know?
Yeah.
Because honestly, as much as it could murder you, you dispatched its clip-off allies, you know? So, you know, as much as it couldn't escape, it could still communicate with those things and, you know, sense stuff and things like that.
Like, I think it came down to, in this, well, there's an issue in the party that I feel is going to begin to crop up even more. It is the fact that a majority of us are chaotic neutral, some of us leaning towards evil a little bit. Yakul and Misty are definitely a little bit evil leaning. And Chester is chaotic good.
I think the thing is also...
good character is gonna clash with this party a lot.
I think that's the thing I have to say is, though, Yakul, I don't know where and why, got more evil.
I think it is from the roleplay wise, I think from the barbarian levels.
Okay.
Is where that began.
Yeah, but it's sort of like, if I take Yakul, and you know, I'm not saying like first season Yakul, I'm talking like second, third season Yakul. Second, third season Yakul did some stuff, but felt more like I did some stuff because I'm a pirate and there's the pirate way of doing things, and I can, like, you know, I don't have to go to extremes, you know.
Yakul's jumping to a lot of extremes now.
Yeah, I just don't know where that happened. With
I'm not sure, because it's hard to pinpoint where that happened, because I don't remember.
Yeah.
Beyond 3 weeks.
Honestly, it's it's similar for me. Like, I can remember the overall plot of things, but little things sort of like,
The thing is, we're not actually that murdery.
Yeah, that's the thing is.
It's
like,
mostly because of Yaku.
Yeah, I will definitely say that. There's been a lot of times where you can say, well, they're kind of murdery. Well, yes, but there's a lot of times where murder wasn't the first option. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Look at what happened with the entire, like, spy things. You know.
The whole spy theater, that was entirely solved diplomatically.
Yeah. And, you know, combat would have been fine, but it was much more interesting, I feel like.
We would have brushed through the combat, because we're a very powerful party.
Yeah.
We have a lot of very strong builds.
I think it's what your builds are, and I'm going to say this about the game. Your builds are unbalanced.
Yes.
And by what I would... people might ask what I mean by that. I mean that there is certainly a lot of combats you're very powerful on. There are also combats you are terrible at.
Yes.
Things that use a lot of magical abilities that cause status ailments will fuck you up. Also, things that don't target normal AC will mess with you heavily.
Yeah. My character is built to avoid that, because I took the Spell Drinker feat path.
Yeah.
So I have extremely high saves. I have Inquisitor stuff that can get rid of illnesses or delay them. But the bulk of the party is three melee martial characters.
Yeah.
And 2 of them don't have great saves.
No. Like, you know, okay, Joe can use Charm Life a few times per day. That's great. If I would do something that's, hey, a ranged touch attack, then honestly, it doesn't matter then, you know, and granted it could be safe stuff, you know. And again, it only takes a bad one. We saw with Joe, failing things like the was it fear? No, it was nausea.
Nausea, which took him out of a combat for 4 rounds.
Yeah. Which wasn't a lot, but sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have just seen with something with a DC of, I think it was 23. It would have waved exhaust first, which would have fucked all of you up. And then second turn would have been, hey, I activate my horrific appearance now. I just use it on all of you. Every living thing within 30 feet of it, make a will save or take some charisma damage and be confused for like 4 rounds. 1d4 rounds.
The interesting thing to note is I was the only player that feasibly could escape that combat, because I can just Raven Slate and fly 50 feet up the tunnel and leave.
Yeah.
Jacob can fly, he can escape too, so that'd be 2 people who can get out. Revia might have something. There are 2 marshals who'd be trapped down there.
Yeah. It was...
Luckily, we diplomacied through it after arguing. Arguing that put me in a mildly bad mood.
I was just, like, flabbergasted when I was trying to be like... it's sort of like 5 Ways to Sunday. I'm like, hey, I took... Like, it's hard to say, like, until I physically had to lay it out in front of them. Like, I took a second look at this thing over the week. Don't fight it!
Yeah, Joe kept pushing to fight it.
I think it's because Joe's character's a melee character, and he was kind of like, he hasn't had a chance to do any of his things. And then, like, the last combat, he got messed up. Yeah. That's really why he was doing it. I understand that's the reasoning why, but it's like...
I absolutely get it.
But it's like, we're like, yeah, time and place, buddy. Time and place.
Yeah, we're going to a war. We're gonna have plenty of fights.
I actually could have had you guys fight that guy, and honestly, I should have the way the game wrote it, the Sun, because I looked at that, and it was one of those things that happens to be the bad part of the way this game is laid out. Remember, we talked about it. We talked about how bad Infamy and Disrepute was, kind of, and how that they didn't talk about raising it at all.
Yeah.
You have to have 40 to make him go to what I did with him.
This is my hot take. We just need to ignore Infamy and Disrepute from now on, because the game, the book, the way the book's written, fucked us over.
They don't tell you have to focus on it.
Yeah, we just at this point have to ignore it.
Yeah.
Because it mechanically we would fail everything around it, because the book didn't tell people to focus on it, and by the time it does tell you to focus on it, you're at a point where you can't.
Yeah, you get some bonuses here and there, but you have to do stuff during all, like, the other adventures. Like, you have to be like, oh, we stopped at this location, that's a new location. We spend some time working on our legend there. That's what you're really supposed to do to increase that. And I'm like, well, you guys didn't, because you didn't know about that, and I didn't know about that, honestly, until, like, now. And, like, looking at it, I'm like, 40's a lot. You guys have, like, 30.
We have 30.
I gave you the bonus for retrieving the sword, and you were over 30. You weren't 30 until you got that. Like, the bonus for retrieving the sword was 4. And so that put you over 30. I'm like, that's how low you were. I'm like, wow. Like, I didn't believe, I don't think it really comes up a lot after Here's the Problem. Like, it gives you some abilities which are kind of neat. But, like...
And overall... The outcome with that sword was going to be the same, because I was just going to push to give it to the werewolf guy for help. Get him on side.
Yeah.
So the outcome was more or less going to be the same. We would get ships regardless.
Yeah. This is the one. Honestly, if you want to do that one instead, that would be fine. But, like, you could have fought that guy then, too. And I was like... It was just like the way they set him up, honestly, it was like... It's just like, hey, I want my mom's sword, give it to me. And I'm like, that's just such a... It doesn't feel like a great reason to, like, just slaughter this guy. Because I'm like, he's less difficult than the last thing. Yes, you just fought something difficult, but you still had some time to, like, heal up and recover.
Yeah. Like, I think that was a better outcome, aside from his awful move.
Honestly, that again, I think I talked about this before we started. Trying to find these outcomes and trying to like fix some of the mess up and stuff is hard because sometimes, like, especially again, like the infamy and disrepute stuff, I didn't know enough about it to stop it.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't notice because it's a bajillion adventures in the future from when they mentioned it. They're finally like, hey, here's some really critical stuff where you really would have wanted to put this up, and I'm like, oh,
thanks, Paizo.
You can mention earlier on that, hey, it's an important thing. Make sure your players raise it.
I expect you to read all 6 books. Before, yeah, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Anyway. So, Buccaneers. I'm just going to say, I'm making some plans, which hopefully will be great for the next time. And we'll see if we get to them, because I don't know how long the meeting with the
there's werewolf chat, and then, there's CL chat, and then there's some party chats that are probably going to happen.
And I don't know how long that's going to take, honestly.
Yep.
So that's a kind of, we'll play it by ear and see where things go. Thursday. Do you have Thursday?
My Thursday game. In the Thursday game, they went to a monastery and discovered it was frozen in time.
Ooh.
So they went to investigate and learned that chronal rifts are a thing in this world, which are holes in space and time that freeze things in place and can lead you into a different era of history. So they went through and investigated, which is what I planned for them to investigate it. I made the critical mistake of, 1, forgetting that clerics get tongues, and 2, forgetting that Lindsay preps the weirdest spells as a cleric. So I had to bullshit for an hour because they talked to the ancient people, and I had to make up a lot of world lore on the fly, and I did write most of it down, thankfully. But basically, they went back in time, kind of. Sort of stuck in between time, so they couldn't really be seen, but they could interact with things. I'm just gonna say, the first reaction was to test they could do. Lighting broke into a building, which was hilarious. That was great. The druid tried, first was like, considered lighting, putting a bonfire under someone with create bonfire. I'm like, that's just gonna kill that person. Please don't. So they settled on just putting it next to them to see if it interact with them. It did. And then they talked to some magical cops who were investigating the area. Well, I say they, Cell did. As a spooky ghost, presumably.
I guess if they're magic cops, they're like, crap, a ghost.
Yeah, they know what planar things are. So they had a conversation, learned some lore. Cell learned that the primordial he's helping is something ancient that was sealed away long ago. So he probably shouldn't fuck with it anymore. Will he? I don't know. I've planned either way what happens if that thing either gets out or is left in prison.
That's a tough one. I can see Cell continuing to poke it.
Yeah, I have no problems if he does. It just makes the world more fun for me. Then they talked to Lion's Heritage mom. She came to visit because she is an adventurer as well. Had a nice conversation. They learned more information about a person and a book. And then they went inside of the monastery after the rift closed and met what is probably the worst NPC I've ever made visually. It is a dark elf with 4 arms and 6 eyes.
Great.
She's a very nice person, but visually probably horrific. And she is the high priest of the temple.
Oh, good.
And then they're headed to the capital of the country now, because they have business there. And that was that session. There was a lot of lore.
Sounds like it, which is... sounds like at least it was like...
It was A lot of lore I made up on the fly.
You know, they forced a lot of lore. It's sort of like
Who the fuck preps tongues as a cleric?
If you're in Pathfinder, it makes sense. There's a lot of random languages. In D&D, not so much. In 5e worlds, traditionally, they're just not so complex that it really comes up.
Oh yeah, that was Thursday, and then Friday games ended last week, so you know we don't have that.
Day off on a Friday. Look,
I
honestly,
know, I got to sleep for once.
Hey, you know, it's an extra day. You know, hey, yay. Like, honestly, I think it's good for you folks. You folks just have this huge, like, freaking week schedule. Like, I have 2 days a week. Oh, how many do you have?
I have a few.
Just a few.
Having Friday off is nice, but the game I run don't count, because that brings me happiness and enjoyment.
Well, you get to, like, fuck with them. I mean, like, they bring it on themselves.
Do things.
Mm-hmm. Anyway. Alright. Hey, I think that was our week in gaming. Hurrah! Unless something happened last Saturday. I didn't think I asked, but
I didn't have anything on Saturday.
I didn't do anything. I did nothing. So if you missed it during this week, I could talk about it there. I had 2 things. If you want to check them out, I had a class guide, which basically is an introduction to all of Pathfinder 2nd Edition's characters and kind of how to play them and how they're a little different from 5e or Pathfinder 1st Edition, so you get an idea of what these class means. And then I dove into the spiritual aspects of the world of darkness, is the best way to say it, where you could have the werewolves, which are very animistic kind of way, or you can have the vampires, which there's a couple of them that go very heavily into very religious connotations, and others that are like, it's allegories, but technically there's some aspect of that story which is true. And then you've got into other weird ones, which just, I gotta be honest, dude, it's this weird thing which made me think more on religious stuff than I thought it would, trying to dive into this kind of thing, you know? It's such a interesting thing, because there's so many beliefs that these supernatural beings have, but it's that weird thing of, like, you know, demons are a thing in the world of darkness. They say they've met God, or their version of a god. Is it the actual God in the comparison of the Christianity God? According to them it is, but again, like, I go by if your creator tells you something and is very powerful, are you going to question it or understand where its place in the cosmology is? If it has different place in the cosmology, it's a really hard question, you know? That's a thing that, unfortunately, is really hard to answer with that kind of thing. So I kind of went with a neutral stance of figure out what the hell your character would believe.
Yeah.
And go with that. Look at it from the place you came from. Anyway, and there was some really weird theories in there too. I'm gonna say that. It's a discussion. I spent like an hour talking about this stuff, and it's at least worth diving into a little bit just for the weirdness of the entire cosmology. So I recommend that. Anyway, so those were those things, updates for those if you want to go check them out. I'm going to try to at least let people know what I did during the week. Next week, don't have any exact plans yet. I'll figure that out tomorrow. The big things are, I am planning for the mass battle, if we get to it, for Buccaneers of Shackled Sea, which will be Wednesday. Might not get to it, but the new updated version of it that doesn't actually involve combat, but a bunch of checks and all the characters, hopefully will be done by then. I've been working on it. We'll see how well I get everything set up and stuff like that. And I'll do some gaming during the week. And that's about it. And I don't know what yet. So that's my update for my schedule. Make sure to check it out. Thank you for joining me, Momo.
No problem.
Certainly see you at very least on Wednesday for Buccaneers. If not off stream at some point in time. For those of you out there, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, great rest of your Saturday, and honestly, just have a good time. Have an enjoyable time. Feel great. Feel safe, sane, all that kind of great things. And I hope the best for everybody. Until we see you again, even if it's just coming next week for more Discussing Tabletop. So, anyway, farewell, everybody. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.